Review Committee for August 1st, 2022, 7 p.m. here at Sandwich Town Hall. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and broadcast live by Sandwich Community Television. First order of business for this evening is a review of the draft minutes from the July 13th meeting. Did everybody have an opportunity to review the minutes? Any questions, comments, concerns?
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to comment, these are the most incredible notes that I have ever seen in any meeting or any committee or any group I've ever been in.
We have the best recorder in the land. Well, when you think about it, at some point, someday, someone is going to potentially look back on these minutes many years from now, and they'll be very comprehensive. That's great. So with that, I will take a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the minutes of 7:13? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Fitch is abstaining, as he was not with us.
I was not present.
That's right.
I know I can vote, but I know you don't need me.
That is very fair, sir. So at our last meeting, Town Manager Dunham and Town Council provided us with a lot of thoughts around the existing charter document. On our agenda for this evening is the Assistant Town Manager is going to provide us with her thoughts as well as her experience from the town of Falmouth with representative town meeting, with the hope being that we can have some discussion around that tonight and perhaps draw some conclusions or opinions. I do have the town clerk scheduled to come and see us 2 weeks from tonight, and I'm guessing that we'll probably add an additional guest potentially for that meeting if we can make the schedule work. Does that all sound acceptable and good?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So, Ms. Harper, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Can you guys all hear me okay? This should work. One caveat, I left my glasses downstairs, so when we get the question and answer part, maybe, oh, there they are. Now I can see.
There we go.
Oh, now I can, thank you very much. I'm just going to hand out some comments, and I will make sure that you get them electronically afterwards. You can just follow along. I should hit every point on here, and I wanted to start out with just a couple of opening comments. One, nothing that I'm reporting on my experience is intended to be positive or negative. They're just really are my experience working with a representative town meeting. And just a little bit of background on that experience. I worked in a larger community, the town of Falmouth. Many more services than the town of Sandwich provides, a water department, wastewater department, a much larger public works division, sort of more complex central business district, a little bit different of a makeup than the town of Sandwich. And so as a result of the complexities, land use, environmental, regulatory, that really did result in what I'm using the term special interests, and I don't mean that in a negative way. There were just more unique interests there than I have experienced thus far in the town of Sandwich. And so I just want to leave that as sort of the lens that I look at the charter through. I had over 20 years experience in that community in progressively responsible public local government management. I went through and counted at one point, and it's more than 45 town meetings that I attended during that time. So I would say I'm fairly experienced in at least observing and participating in a representative town meeting. There were 2 moderators in that time, very different styles and approaches, but that certainly colors the way town meeting is run and facilitated as the moderator's approach. And I worked with 4 town managers, including myself. So again, that was stylistically, everyone has a different approach to the way they handle those meetings. And I would say that I enjoyed almost all of them. I really do like going to town meeting. It is a really wonderful opportunity to engage with the community, to watch the civic process unfold. You get the culmination of all the work that you've done over the course of 6 months or a year, and sometimes the results go your way and sometimes they don't, but it really is always something. I think essentially we always feel like, most times town meeting gets it right. So you have that's my perspective on town meeting. And so I really thank all of you for inviting me to comment on that, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I'm not going to talk in any sort of terms of governance. Bud mentioned to you that he's been a student of local government for his whole career. I would say I've been a practitioner of local government. I didn't come from that background into local government, so I really come as much as a practitioner and observer. So that's the way I'm going to focus my comments for all of you. I would say that representative town meeting is effective. It has a very engaged membership. And you wouldn't be surprised that still even some representative town meeting members don't read the warrant until they get there that evening. So, you can't count on everyone to be prepared, but the process surrounding a representative town meeting, I think for the most part ends up with many more of the participants more informed. And I think that's part of the structure, and the structure does give you that more informed member of town meeting. It is more complicated because of the structure of the representative town meeting. It involves more elected officials, and that's something that you might want to put some thought to, is that those town meeting members are in fact elected from the community at large by precinct. The meetings themselves and the support of those meeting members over the course of the months and years that lead up to a town meeting does require more preparation from both the elected bodies, whether it's the school committee or the Board of Selectmen. There's more demand for process and information from those town meeting members. And certainly along with that goes the need for more staff support. That might include, in fact, more bodies to support the needs of town meeting in terms of just general staff support. Most communities that have a representative town meeting have specific staff that are identified to support those processes. And I'm not saying it's a full-time exercise, but there is an effort that goes along with supporting the town meeting process. So I thought I would just walk through those comments with a few more sort of highlights on what I mean by some of these. And again, my experience, any other manager may have different comments, but these are sort of mine, having worked for quite a long time with it. I'd say it's particularly effective for really complicated matters that might require multiple town meeting votes or that have complex motions. The town meeting members tend to be more familiar with the processes, and so that it makes it easier to have a conversation about those. It may not necessarily be easier to come to a conclusion with town meeting, but I think that is a little bit easier. The consistency of an elected body member can build stronger community relations, and you'll see I have a note there that can also build weaker community relations. If an item before town meeting is significantly controversial, and there's a subset of the meeting that is not happy with the outcome, you very frequently you can see that item come back time and time again, more so than, I know we've seen that experience here on some items, but more so in a representative town meeting. And I can provide thoughts on why I think that is, but I think it's a practical matter. Both that elevated great feeling that you get from having a really successful town meeting can carry from one meeting to the next, more so because you know you've got the same folks there. The same thing can happen with issues that maybe aren't quite as positive for the community. But, in my experience, the depth of knowledge of town meeting members from a representative basis, and I'm sure the same is true for an open town meeting, but the wisdom of the members is sort of a pool that you can draw from. I think the staff valued that from time to time. If there was an internal issue that you thought, you really would like to run by someone that's interested in a topic before you bring it to a public setting, there's kind of a set pool of close to 300 to 400 people, depending on the number of town meeting members, that you can sort of draw from, that will have a pretty good grasp on what issues are, and that might be able to be supportive in an ad hoc kind of way. So that was something that I think we found helpful from a representative town meeting standpoint. I'd say the meetings are probably more complicated And again, that's a result of, I think, more engagement. Representative town meeting members are, some of them, are incredibly nimble with the rules of procedure. So what can happen is, and I'm going to use the word manipulations, and I don't mean that to be a negative word, but they understand the process and they know how to use that process to get an outcome or a decision presented in a way that is to their benefit as an individual town meeting member and perhaps not as the town as a whole. So that, I think, is a challenge of a representative town meeting. It's both a benefit and a challenge. So that is something that you would have to cope with. And again, that goes to the moderator, and I'm not here to talk about the moderator, but a moderator would have to be really keenly familiar with the rules of procedure and be comfortable navigating that with a very informed body. One of the things that we use the term frequently that I haven't heard here, and I'll say something too that I meant to open with. When I first came to the town of Sandwich, one of the concerns I had that what am I going to have to navigate? Is what in the heck is this open town meeting and how does it work? Right. So the issues that I'm talking with you about as a representative town meeting, I didn't understand the open town meeting. I had never worked with it. I was very concerned that I would see a meeting process that was inconsistent. There would be different faces at every meeting. There would be a lack of informed decision-making, and that you'd see the meeting stacked from meeting to meeting depending on the issues. I have not observed that. That is not something that I've seen since I've been here. Maybe one meeting, there was a very large constituency for an issue that was broadly supported, I think, in the community, unanimous vote, and that would be the Center for Active Living and the library vote. But other than that, there have been, 7 or 8 town meetings in the very short time that I've been here. We've had quite a few because of the strangeness of the times. But the open town meeting that we have here has been very consistent. So again, I don't want to be comparing the two, but that was, I came to this town wondering what is this all about and how does it work? And it seems to be, my opinion is, it seems to be working very effectively. So one of the items you need to think about if you're considering a representative town meeting is that, they are elected by precinct. Hopefully at the back of your packet you've got a couple pages. You might not, but I'll make sure that you get it. There, again, you have elected officials, and it's not universal at all, but you oftentimes would have individuals contact the town either in person or email or by phone and say, I'm so-and-so, I'm a town meeting member, and then lay out their issue, creating a sense that they have some super role in the community that is superior to that of a citizen in general. And so you've got 300 to 400 folks in town that view them, and not universally, that could view themselves as having some influence over local decision-making, and that could, impact the way service is provided equitably. We obviously have a very really thoughtful, terrific staff here in the town of Sandwich. I don't see that as a big issue, but it is something to be aware of, that there's some perceived influence that comes with the title. Some elected town meeting members, and I've heard this conversation many times, I'm sure you will think about it, consider themselves voting for their constituents, whether it's the neighborhood that they live in, the precinct that they're elected from, but they don't think of themselves as one member, one vote. And what is very clear in an open town meeting is that you've got one member and one vote. And so that's a distinction that I draw from my observations. The seat that I took at those many town meetings was at the table, elevated over town meeting. I was the assistant town manager. My role was really only on those issues for which I was presenting. I didn't have a presiding role at the meeting, so I had a lot of time to observe just sort of what was going on in the audience, which just where I sit here, I don't get that sort of perspective. But you can see the body voting in areas. So whether it's an employee group or a group of neighbors or friends or interest group, you can kind of see the wave of votes happening by interest groups. And again, interest groups is not a negative term, it's just people who have an affinity for a particular item, and you can really see that happen during the meetings. And over time, you can see that happen over the course of time, that is part of our routine. Again, I talked about the good or bad feelings kind of carrying over from one meeting to another. One of the things I think is a challenge are employees who are elected. I think the same issue, of course, applies to an open town meeting, but more so that when you have employees over the course of several years that are not only town meeting members, but beneficiaries of collective bargaining agreements or issues that may be employee related. So that's just a note for you to think about. Again, open town meeting really does demonstrate the one person, one vote. I think representative town meeting, my view is that that is also the intention of a representative town meeting, but.
Can I just interrupt you for a minute? Yeah. You talked about employees. Are employees allowed to be elected as town meeting representatives? Ooh, okay.
In that,
Or is that a charter decision, actually?
that could be.
Right, because it could be, right?
That's interesting, yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. So the next area is really around the elected officials. And what I will get for you, which I thought I copied for you, is the list of precincts, precinct captains. And I was curious, so I went onto the website to pull that because that was an important part of our process, to know who the 9 precinct captains are. And I'll talk about why in a minute. But they now not only have a precinct captain, they have a deputy captain and a clerk. So there's now 27 additional leaders with titles that are, and I'm not, these folks are tremendously giving people that are contributing to their community, but just from an organizational standpoint, that's more of a, more folks you have to communicate with as you're preparing for a town meeting. And the precinct captain has some pretty clear roles. They're part of the town meeting procedures, but I don't believe in the charter there are any specific roles for the precinct captains. Every town meeting, it was the practice there, kind of went a couple of ways. There was an all precinct meeting, and the purpose of that meeting, and I think it was actually a very valuable exercise when there was a participation level in that, where the moderator ran through the warrant informally prior to town meeting, so that any town meeting members could ask questions. There was not to be any debate over those, but to ask questions about warrant articles, so that when they came to town meeting, they came with more information about the article. And generally, those focused on several of the key items, and the more ministerial items didn't carry a lot of energy at those meetings. At some point, those really failed to generate the participation or outcome, and so the precinct captains really took it upon themselves to hold precinct meetings. And there were 9 precincts, so there were several of them that joined up, so maybe 4 or 5 precinct meetings over the course of the weeks leading up to town meeting. So that was a fairly intensive process, both for the staff, the town meeting members to participate in, and anyone that might be involved in the articles that may be part of the discussion. And oftentimes that involves private citizens who may have zoning or other items before the meeting. So that was a fairly intense process. I'd say, depending on the year and who's involved, right? People are really drive so much of it. Did improve sort of knowledge, but they all evolve into debate. So that's one of the challenges. It's hard to get a group of interested citizens together and have an issue before them and not really get into the details.
So these precinct meetings are meetings of the elected town meeting members on a per precinct basis, or perhaps collectively?
At a precinct, there were, multiple precincts would get together. So precinct 3 and 4 would meet, precinct 5 and 6 would meet at a joint meeting rather than having everyone go to all 9. There were maybe 4 or 5 that happened. And that every year that changes, groups will. They do try to reduce the number of those meetings for everybody's benefit, but it still does mean, a process around that. And they aren't publicly posted. They are notified to the precincts. It isn't a public meeting. Are not, yeah. They are not. And again, differs from community to community. This is the experience that I had in that community. Again, I noted the idea of there being super community members, and I think that is one of the things you need to be aware of, is that town meeting members do view themselves as highly responsible to the community, and that results in a lot of support that's needed to make sure they get the information they need to feel comfortable making the decisions they need to make. So more preparation and support. They really do look for more engagement and information. The articles had longer explanations on the warrant, and the motions were more detailed than I've seen in this particular open town meeting. There was more content in the warrants, so more maps and things for town meeting members to see more detail. I think we rely on the presentations at town meeting and the development of those items as they make their way through the many public processes that are required before an article gets placed on the warrant. The town meeting members do reach out to staff directly for information on articles, whether it's the planning department, the Department of Public Works, the town manager's office, the finance director. There's a lot of outreach to staff by individual town meeting members so they can feel informed. That again, it is really none of us in any community that's been appointed to a public role has any problem answering questions, but when the volume is high, it can interfere with day-to-day work. So you have to just anticipate that really in the weeks that led up to town meeting, most of the executive staff that had a role in town meeting was really focused only on town meeting. There was very little time for other things because the demand for information and support required it. And again, that wasn't universal. It really depends on what the highlights of the warrant, that particular warrant, were. The town meeting members, as a result of the process by which they're elected by precinct, is more informed and consistent and stable, observationally. There is some monitoring of participation because it's important that town meeting members, of course, if you're elected, that you do attend and represent your precincts. There is a waiver of absence that is, I believe it's in the charter, that town meeting members need to ask for a waiver if they're not going to be in attendance. So that's, again, something to think about. Again, I don't think it's a requirement of every representative town meeting, but it was something that was part of the process there. Didn't always happen. Town meeting members often, may not make it without that, but it was a process that was requested. It is a great development ground for other boards, committees, and commissions, as is an open town meeting. Someone that regularly attends an open town meeting learns an awful lot about the community and what interests them and what concerns them and what might be useful for them to invest their time and resources and talents in. But the fact that they are elected for a multi-year term does mean that they return for several years and just become more informed on the key issues of the town. Meetings do seem to run longer in a representative setting, meaning town meetings, very late into the evening and almost routinely at least 2, sometimes 3 nights, and occasionally a little bit more than that. Again, that's really a function of the discussion that takes place at town meeting. So that's probably it on my representative town meeting thoughts. I have a few others, but I thought I would just stop for a minute and answer any questions you might have.
So how does the Board of Selectmen interact with the representative town meeting?
I'd say they do not interact with individual town meeting members any differently than they would interact with a member of the community.
So what is their respective responsibilities then?
So town meeting members' responsibilities are the same as an open town meeting member's
But the
responsibility.
selectmen,
Well, I guess it could go anyway, but I did some research on this, and I think in Falmouth that the selectmen are not voting members of town meeting,
oh,
if that's part of your question.
that is.
And that's a charter issue that
Yeah.
could do it.
I thought that might be your question, yeah. So I think in Falmouth that the selectmen can not vote.
No, I believe they can.
Maybe somewhere else. fishing around.
Yes, I think Falmouth can vote. Good question.
Just a couple of comments. You really stressed the complicated nature of the representative town meeting, but one of the things that kind of strikes me is that is there the potential of this forum really dividing the town and dividing it? Because I'm looking at, East Falmouth T-Ticket have a lot of different interests than West Falmouth and North Falmouth. And I'm wondering if these groups get together, is there one group that, walks away feeling very unrepresentative?
So that's such a good question. That was part of my thinking in my comments. And I can say when I first joined that community, many more than that now, the geographic differences were important. The, T-Ticket, North Falmouth, West Falmouth, that was definitely part of the color of the meeting. But I would say that interests over issues are more likely to be a driver of that. So I think what you're saying is very much a possibility, and that was part of the tone of that meeting. I don't think it is as much so anymore. It is much more of a one meeting kind of environment, but the issues most certainly unite or divide depending on where you fall. And sometimes those can be based on where you live.
Yep, go ahead.
So how many of these people actually attend the representative meeting?
I'm going to do a guess. It's about 340. I didn't look at at the actual number.
So you have the 9 precincts, and then you have the captain, deputy clerk, and then are they limited to these number of people that they can?
Yes, so the charter would set forth the number of elected officials by precinct and the method by which you would determine that number. So it might be population, I'm assuming the committee would make that recommendation.
It's 27 per precinct in Falmouth anyway today, right? So there's 243.
You did more homework than I did.
Right? Am I right? That's the precinct.
I'd have to confirm. I
the
really
precinct
don't remember.
captain and the deputy. I mean, they're part of the 27. They're not.
Oh yeah,
on
no,
top.
they're not additive. No, they're just and it's very informal. They've sometimes it's a self-declared depending on the process because the precincts don't really meet, but for the process of the precinct meeting.
And I assume the meeting itself is open to the general public. They just can't participate.
Correct. Well, and they can participate so long as the meeting allows them to participate, similar to someone who's
They
not a
wanted
resident.
to express their opinion.
Yes, correct.
But it's just these elected members that can,
Participate and vote.
okay.
Yeah. And I may have overdone the precinct captain issue, but those are sort of voluntary spots, and they really do help with the communication with the town for scheduling purposes and information sharing.
Just because I'm not really familiar with this system, the members that want to be part of the precinct representatives, do they run for office? Do they campaign? Do they put signs out? How do they get on the...
Occasionally, for the most part, they're known to their precinct. So they're names that are known. So, when I go to vote, I see 9 or how many ever names there are, and, I appoint those I'm familiar with. It's not
every 3 years, right?
Yes.
So 9 per year.
And most often, they are returned guests, so they're coming back for another term.
So does that become contested sometimes?
Occasionally, it's more that people hold their seats for so long, and there are certain precincts that it's really tough to get a spot in that precinct because those folks hang on to their seats for a long time. Whereas others, there may be more mobility among the members.
So there's no term limits then?
I don't think so.
I mean, honestly,
Should be.
Yeah.
My-
Again,
my-
those might be a figment of a particular charter, but I think those are charter committee discussion points. Yeah.
I actually wonder if it would be challenging to fill all those seats. with folks that are willing to get nomination papers and have their name put on a ballot.
You know, in some ways,
Truth, I really do. Even people that attend town meeting all the time, that may, make them resistant to doing what they're doing.
we feel pretty good when we get 340 at an open town meeting, so. But, this whole description of this thing, it strikes me, it's almost like something like the old Boston political ward system, you get in this thing and your name is known, and when it comes time to get the guys to shovel the street, you know who they're going to be.
It's not at all that way. I hope that I didn't cast that type of a color on it. It is a very highly functioning process, but they're much more engaged and informed in the issues, so everyone else around them needs to be as well, and that's important.
John?
Heather, do I hear you correctly, though, that the debate is more on point? People are better prepared?
They're better prepared to voice their view, yes.
It just seems, that's the thing that concerns me about town meeting as we know it, open town meeting, is that there's really no debate. You get somebody influential who may say something, and I personally just don't often have the feeling that whatever the warrant article was, that it was well debated. And I would look forward to, in a representative setting, the people being a little more educated on the subject and taking the time to learn about it and being able to debate. I mean, really, when's the last time we heard any debate on the budget?
We did have one question this year. I made that same comment, and then I realized I was wrong. But there was one individual who asked, I think, 2 questions.
Yes.
All right.
But
Well-
that's a perfect example, though.
Yeah. I mean, go. I mean, that's good for management.
You have to go back a long way. It did happen in the late 1980s when money was very, very tight. There was quite a bit of debate at that point, but I haven't seen it since.
And I will say on that particular issue, there was generally not a whole lot of debate over the budget unless there was a particular.
Well, the issues that are going to confront us in the future are going to be more complicated than they have been in the past. And I noticed that one of your points is that in a complicated setting, having informed participants is helpful. And I don't know how you get around this without paring down the current format. I don't know the answer, and I'm not in favor of one or the other right now. But I look forward to the debate here as to, which really is best looking ahead. When there were only 500 people in the town, we know what worked, and we know why it worked. But how often do you leave town meeting now and say, this just isn't right? These selectmen and the town manager have set this up, and they've gotten everything they wanted. Now, that may be perfectly fine, but it may not. That's just...
Well, I think what it comes down to, and that's like the infamous they, right? They did this, they did that. They're getting this, they're getting that. And it comes down to accountability. At the outset, I'm in favor of changing something because there's not a lot of accountability. So we've created the opportunity for up to 16,000 people to attend a town meeting. But we know that if we saw 10% of that, it would be a miracle. The most people I remember ever seeing at town meeting was, I think, in 2015 with the sand on the beach, and there was actually overflow. I'm sure there was overflow at some other point in the past, and I just don't remember it. But I attended my first town meeting, I think, in 1992. I've been to a lot of town meetings, but the reality is that there's really no accountability or incentive for people to attend town meeting. So this is an opportunity to put people in a position of responsibility for attending, create that accountability. Hopefully they're showing up as informed folks who can debate the issues, because I think it's a healthy move, much like what you just said. We need informed people there who can actually participate in the discussion. From my seat as a selectman for 6 years, there's not a lot of satisfaction for us and folks coming to town meeting and being uninterested in initiatives that have been worked on for months. Really, right? So this is what happens is the folks that are, interested in those issues, they're the ones that show up and then they vote and then that's it. It doesn't really serve anybody very well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I have had a problem. I'm not sure. I think a lot about representative town meeting and have a discussion with my husband about it because we're on opposite sides here. But I think that if people were informed, if people had interest in how the government works and how their money is spent, and they become informed about it, and they show up to town meeting, and they vote because they're informed, that's one thing. But I think that the town has got so large that I think you get into this single issue that Heather was talking about can happen in open town meeting too. And the informed people come and they make the decisions, and then the uninformed people don't come and then complain about the decisions that were made. So it's a real it's a real conundrum. I mean, selectmen's meetings are open. Anybody can come. Anybody can talk, within a certain limit. If there are a lot of people that want to talk, the selectmen have the option of having a workshop or a public hearing or whatever. But it doesn't happen. So, on the one hand, the representative town meeting to me is attractive because I at least have confidence that the people that are elected, and there are more people other than a 5-member board of selectmen, would bring a different variety or more of a variety of experiences. That's just my opinion.
Yep. Well, I agree with what you said. Does representative town meeting go for several days?
It frequently goes for several days, yeah.
That's one of the things that, there seems to be some goal of concluding annual town meeting in an hour and a half. Let's get it in and get it out. Throughout life now, as things get more complicated, or the government, we dedicate, or I shouldn't say that, we delegate certain voting rights to others. It just strikes me as it would be more likely than not that those making the effort to want to participate in a representative, wanting to get a precinct elected, that they would be more likely to be prepared and thoughtful about whatever the issue may be.
Well, I think a couple of things that are interesting, but one is this is an open meeting, and this is the third time that we've met, I think, and we've had the same audience members here each time, I think. So here we are having a meeting, an open meeting about whether or not we should have representative town meeting, but nobody's here. The other is that with elected town meeting members, there's an expectation of certain individuals to be there representing them. So if you look at some of the debate where folks are saying, well, geez, we should just take town meeting, eliminate it, and every question should be on a ballot, it doesn't make any sense for a lot of reasons, because there does need to be thoughtful discussion. The law doesn't really accommodate that for certain decisions, and that doesn't make any sense. However, with specific folks in specific seats, I mean, Falmouth continued to have town meeting remotely during the pandemic because they were all elected seats. So they held town meeting via Zoom. There's accountability for who has voted which way, because all the votes are all the votes roll call votes? I don't know this, but I assume that there's some version of that.
That's been a change since I left. It was a manual.
Yeah, I do think one of the other things from the perspective of town meeting is we should be promoting efficiency with town meeting no matter which way it goes, because there is technology available that would allow people to vote, which would make the meeting process more efficient, which I think I would certainly be in support of. But all the folks who can't attend the meeting, now someone is attending on their behalf that they have elected to do so for them. And they know who to go to. These are the people from my precinct that I can go to talk about my concerns with town meeting. And those folks, like you said, are going to be informed and prepared for the discussion.
Like to hope.
And if they're prepared for the discussion, which happens, town meeting happens, we'll just say twice a year, whatever. If it went across 2 or 3 nights, would that be the worst thing, twice a year? Open town meeting, folks are upset about having to come once a year for a couple hours. Kelly?
I did not grow up in New England, so the whole idea of any type of town meeting was very foreign to me. But I've been here since 2003, so I've been around a little while to see how it all works. And again, I am not well-versed or even versed at all in representative town meeting other than what Heather presented. But as I hear it, I hear us creating another level of bureaucracy, if you will. And I see that we elect our select board, we select them to represent the different areas of the town. So when we talked about like the budget, for instance, you have our town manager and department heads who are very educated and know what it takes to run the town. And then you have them working with our finance committee, which is town representatives that anyone can join committees. You have them, you have the selectmen. All of them are working to put this together to then present it, as I see it, to the town for that final vote. So in that case, I don't see, at that point, I feel like it's almost too late then to have this huge debate over the budget. I feel like that should have happened earlier in the process, before it gets to a town meeting. And that's just an example of the budget. I certainly see the need for debate on different issues, but I don't know, I'm just not being sold on the idea of electing more people when I've already elected my selectmen to, represent me, or, and we have a town, we have town employees who I think are very, if they're not doing their jobs, we have a way, they won't be in their jobs very long, but we have good people in positions, so.
If you then escalate the conversation to the next level, then you look at like the Barnstable model, right? They have no town meeting, they have a town manager, they effectively have a city form of government with town councilors, and they have all the authority, which I've lived here basically my whole life. But as you mentioned, outside of New England, this type of access to local decision-making doesn't really exist, to my knowledge, the way it does here. But that's almost what you're suggesting, I think. Not intentionally, by the way. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. But if folks are going to show up at town meeting to effectively just rubber stamp what's going on, then what's the point?
No, and that wasn't what I was suggesting. I was just saying.
I know that you weren't suggesting it. My interpretation of what happens today is that folks show up and don't actively engage. So I guess what I'm saying is, if we're going to do that, what's the point? Some folks do actively engage, but not to a meaningful level, at least not en masse. John.
May I respond just a little bit to my colleagues' comments here? Imagine this. You have a strong town manager. You have department heads, and they all have special interests in their budgets, right? You have a finance committee. It's appointed by the government to review this. It's not a totally independent third party. So where is somebody who's non-government who might be taking a look at that budget if you don't have representatives at the town meeting?
But isn't that your select board, your selectmen?
No. I've never seen the selectmen take a firm hand in contradiction of a strong town manager. You'd like to think that, but as a practical matter, I don't see it happening. They kind of team up, even though they're technically selectmen elected by the people. but they all work together. And there is certainly there could be debate, but I just say it's less likely to occur at that point. But if you had precinct representatives, they have no political affiliation, or at least you'd think that. They're not working for the government.
But I guess I'm not.
They're working for the taxpayer.
And why aren't the selectmen who's elected, why aren't they working for the people? That's what
They do. I'm not going to criticize that, but they do. But it's not the same. They're more part of the team.
You know, I'm not sure I totally agree with that.
Yeah, it's a little hard.
Well, having been through it for 6 years myself.
I wasn't prepared to get into the
No,
back
I
and forth here, and it's pretty good. And I felt myself.
And I don't think you're saying anything malicious.
No.
By the way,
I think it's a good comment. I think that members of the Board of Selectmen have and do at times strongly disagree with a strong town manager. It might not be done in public, but you know, I know the town manager meets with members of the Board of Selectmen regularly, and the public, you know, individually, one-on-one, which is certainly allowable. And I know that I have expressed very strong opinions on occasion. But on the other hand, though, I think it's much more effective if you do, in the end, work as a team. If you work with each other, respect each other's opposite viewpoints or different viewpoints, and then come to a consensus that everybody believes is right for the town, I think that's very effective. And I think it works very nicely.
I'm just, in my own experience over a lot of years, I haven't seen the kind of challenge coming from the Board of Selectmen to the town manager, at least in open forum, that you might like to say, there's a little spark and there shows some disagreement. I just haven't observed that. And it's no reflection on anybody in particular. It's just a general observation. And I would feel personally pretty good if I had some precinct representatives who were also reviewing these things.
Well, I think if you take the selectmen and the town manager, their collective job is to put together a balanced budget and bring it to present it at town meeting, right? So they're doing that. But then on the flip side, and I think part of what John is saying is if you had a larger, more diverse group of people who was not in the trenches building this thing, they'd be more likely to ask questions and challenge what's been created.
I'd like to hope that's true.
Right? My personal opinion is if they've been elected to fill these roles, they're going to show up, or they're likely to show up more informed about what's going on because they're preparing to participate in this meeting.
I will say there was one recent town meeting that really surprised me in terms of the engagement, and it was this last town meeting where we were discussing the investment of $3.5 million in the Sandwich Hollows Golf Course. And we were ready to make a presentation. We worked for weeks on it. We'd given it many times. It wasn't like there was a lot of work that went into being prepared for that meeting. We had been prepared for many more, but no presentation, no discussion. And that wasn't a lack of preparation or a lack of willingness or a lack of engagement or a lack of education. Town meeting didn't ask for it, and it wasn't, we were standing ready to give. And it didn't happen. So I think
It passed unanimously.
It passed unanimously, and sometimes it's the will of the town. There are also some mechanical processes, and this is getting more into moderator stuff. But there are some mechanics that other communities use that allow items that there is clear consensus on the body of town meeting on to pass on a blanket vote. So that is a process that gives the town a couple of chances to determine whether they want to act on it. If it's universal, the town's ready to go on those issues, they vote them and then just discuss those items that the body wants to discuss. And that's sort of an efficiency, accountability piece too. So I think there are some things that we could talk about that are maybe not necessarily charter or maybe modifications to the charter that increase that engagement, participation, and accountability. And as I've said, I worked with a representative town meeting, and I wondered what you all were doing here with this open town meeting, but both prove very effective in their own way. And both have their challenges and benefits. So it's the conversation.
Well, you could also take a look at this another way, and perhaps the lack of challenge to the budget or any of the other issues is a certain amount of satisfaction and confidence that the people who are in charge have done the job. And I wonder, maybe that's part of why there was no debate on the golf course issue and it passed right through. Like people may have thought that you know, this has been looked at and it's reasonable and there's no reason to drag this thing out for, you know, a long discussion.
And I just say, from a staff perspective, you wonder how many people in the room didn't know anything about it, right? So you do worry a little.
Well, I do think that there is a goal to end the meeting, as John mentioned previously, right? Part of the goal is, what time do we get to go home? It's true. It's not. It is true.
These are the things you just observe by being there.
Right. And for somebody who's...
I'm willing to bet the ranch that the business on the golf course was that nobody understood what it was you were talking about.
I mean, I can't tell you just from my perspective how many hours we talked about the golf course. That doesn't have anything to do with the number of hours that were spent on it otherwise. So from my perspective, there's no satisfaction in it passing for me with no discussion. That just tells me nobody cares.
That's what, yes. No disagreement.
Well, if memory serves me right, the town did consider representative form of government a number of years ago, and it was rejected by the voters, so just be aware of that. I think that, I've forgotten how long ago it was.
Yeah. No, I do know that. I don't remember when that was, but I am aware of that. But I do, you know, I think that some of the public debate that I do see would be solved with this new level of accountability if we chose to make that recommendation. And obviously there's a number of mechanical items that need to be determined as part of that. But as we move forward, I think John made a lot of good points about complex issues, having an informed group of people who's ready to debate those issues. Things are certainly not getting simpler. We keep going down more interesting and complicated roads at this table as time goes on.
Well, I would just hope that, at least what's on the back of my mind is I have a vision where there would just be more debate. You would get the feeling as an observer. I don't plan to participate in this. I just say if I observed the town meeting on TV, I would feel like different issues were discussed, different perspectives were advanced, and then a decision was made. I may still disagree with the decision, but still that it was debated. And I've said to myself, I'm not going to participate in town meeting anymore. This is ridiculous. And that's just the feeling I have walking away.
But people are also afraid of it. They're afraid of the process and procedure if they haven't attended before. So I talked to parents over the winter who wanted to come to support the school initiative, right? Many of them had never attended town meeting before. They had no idea what to expect. They didn't know about checking in. They didn't know about voting cards. They didn't know if they were allowed to speak. So that lack of familiarness with the process doesn't help them want to participate in the first place, on top of whatever else might be holding them back. But just for me, on a numbers perspective, we have a zero quorum open town meeting with almost 16,000 registered voters. And if 340 people do show up, we are excited. I'm not, but it's better than 100.
Yeah.
Because you could have a town meeting if just the selectmen showed up. I guess if just the town moderator showed up, you could have a town meeting.
And there are definitely some educational things that could happen if there was interest in doing that as a result of this process, to have the government, you know, really engaging with town meeting members, or having a town meeting member training program, or get to know your department, or the issues, or pre-town meeting prep meeting. Those as mundane as they sound, it gives people an opportunity to sit and hear from the clerk or the moderator, the town manager about, well, here's what this article is about, here's the motion. It's another layer of effort, but it is a way that straddles the interest of not too much elected
But
governance.
that could happen
Right.
at open town meeting.
Correct.
I mean, if
my point.
we
Yep.
were inspired or dedicated and want more people to come to open town meeting, we could do that. I'm not sure I've ever thought of it before. I mean, we have a pre-meeting with the moderator. It's an open meeting. 3 or 4 people come sometimes. They can ask questions about the warrant. I haven't really thought about that before, but I think that that's not a bad idea regardless of the direction we take.
It probably needs to be more of an educational effort and less of a strictly informative about what's on that warrant and more of
Right.
what is the warrant and how does it
Right.
work. And you've seen, as certain town meeting members are very familiar with the rules of procedure, they know how to wield them, and it does make others afraid because they don't understand it.
Right.
And you certainly, we're all familiar with voting initiatives, registering to vote. Perhaps we need to do, town meeting participation initiatives like talking about.
People have to want to participate in that too.
Yes.
Sure. Oh,
yes, correct.
But I would agree with you, though. I do think it's probably more from lack of knowledge or understanding versus not caring.
I think there's like 100 reasons not to go. All right, I don't understand it. I got to help my kid with their homework. I have to work. There's low gas in my car. I had a bad day at work. I mean, there's probably 100 reasons not to go.
Just too busy.
Wicked tired today. My cat's sick. You know what I mean? That's why I'm coming back around a bit, but accountability, right? If you've signed up to go, you need to participate. People are counting on you.
In a representative town meeting, do the representatives generally show up?
Oh, yeah, there's always a quorum. I would say there's always, not the entire body, but there's always, and it's a high number for the quorum.
Okay, so the people who run for the position take it seriously.
Yeah. Occasionally, I think there have been maybe a night, maybe the third night, there's been a failure to get a quorum. So getting the business done efficiently is still important, but there's definitely more engagement, more dialogue at the meeting.
Well, the other thing I would guess is if you were a town meeting member, and you saw the warrant, and even though I'm sure some people still read it when they get there, but if there were issues of public concern, you'd be more likely to go out and research those issues and show up and more informed about them, right? You'd ask those questions of department heads and other folks to try to get the information so that when you got there, you could hit the ground running, because I would still guess there's a similar goal of moving through the business in an efficient manner. Mm-hmm. I won't say end the meeting as quickly as possible, but anything you could do to hit the ground running, I would expect that's what I would do.
So representatives in Falmouth, they can go directly to department heads and ask questions and...
They do, and there's really no other place for them to go.
And doesn't that interfere with the general operating?
Just from a time perspective, yes. So if a town meeting member calls and has a question, generally the process is you let the town manager know what the question is, and then the question needs to be answered.
But any town meeting member from Sandwich could do that today.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I suppose they
Yeah.
could.
Yeah.
Right? And then I would guess maybe what happens is you start putting together a list of what those inquiries are so you can share it en masse to the others so that you can hedge off those questions.
Yes, and generally, once you've experienced it enough, there's a process where you've got those done ahead of time, and you generally have an idea what the questions are going to be.
And transparently, and I think it's obvious, one of the things that in the past that we've tried to do is to try to anticipate as many questions as we can and proactively answer them in public to help people. But there's still going to be new points of view and new questions that come up.
I have a question. If we were to move in a new direction, do we have to get approval from the state, or can we do this on our own without, an oversight from the legislature or anything else? Can we do this?
Well, it would be the town charter modification process, right? So it would need to be voted on at town meeting, then it would go to the legislature
Okay.
and have to get signed by the governor before it actually takes effect. So that applies to every change we make in the document.
Well, let me just ask this. So if Falmouth has approximately, 300 or so people elected for their town meeting, and we have approximately 300 people that come to town meeting, the only difference is now you're saying only those 300 people that are elected could come to town meeting, when one year 500 people may want to come to town meeting.
And I do think that's the other side of the argument. But the other side of that part of the argument is that only 20 people might come to town meeting, because no one's accountable for coming.
But
I would also, just quickly, but, so there's 9 precincts in Falmouth, there's 6 in Sandwich. So you'd have some less folks just based on that. But I think that the reason that people like open town meeting is because they can come if they feel like it. My message would be, please come to participate and sign up for the responsibility of participating so that it truly benefits the common good of the entire community. And there are people that love to come to town meeting, and I would guess that it would be very easy to become a town meeting member. I don't envision becoming a town meeting member being a contested race very much so. Maybe I'm wrong, and that actually would be very entertaining. But I would think if you wanted to be a town meeting member, it would be easy to do. You'd go out and get the 50 signatures or whatever it is, and you'd be on the ballot. And you've committed yourself to participate.
I guess I just don't understand how it's going to be more effective.
It would be, the answer to that is what Heather told us. The people show up better educated,
Right.
more informed, more willing to participate. That's how it's going to be more effective.
But those same people could be attending today.
They could
And
be.
they could be asking the questions, and they could be educated.
True. They could, but they don't.
And you think making them elected is going to make these people come out of the woodwork and do this?
This is the, we got a choice
I
here.
know, I'm playing devil's advocate.
That's okay. We have a choice. And I say I'm beginning to think that it's more likely, based on Heather's testimony tonight, that the folks who become the representatives are going to be a little more interested than the general population. It's a gamble. But it sounds that way.
They're more likely to come with purpose.
Correct.
And I also believe that for the folks who are not town meeting members, now they have visibility to who represents them. So instead of them saying, geez, I couldn't attend for these reasons and these things happened and it's, they're shoving this down our throats, right? Now people have been created that are elected, they're accountable, they have an obligation to show up, they can see how they voted, they can reach out to them prior to the meeting. I know that you're a town meeting member, I want you to know how I feel about this issue going into the meeting, so that those town meeting members could be informed, they could send them email messages, all those things, so that somebody is standing in the room who's representing them.
See,
It's almost like if you thought about it from the perspective of we elect state representatives and state senators, right? The chambers on Beacon Hill are not an open forum. We can't all show up there. They don't even have open doors, which is a totally different issue. But, here we have open doors that anybody can show up, anybody can participate. But we know that they don't. And we know that there's folks that are dissatisfied with the process.
I guess my argument is that we do have elected officials that represent us already, and I feel like the debate, the real debate, needs to be happening before town meeting. That's why we have the committees. That's why we have, there are different avenues and different levels for people to get involved.
When was the last time you attended a selectmen's meeting?
I do not attend the selectmen.
That's okay. But that's my
I do
point.
participate in boards that are important.
That's my point, and it's not about you at all,
Okay.
right? This is very representative of a selectmen's meeting on an average evening.
But if I had an issue, I would not hesitate to call the selectman that represents me. If I had an issue, I
Right,
can
but the
say that I
selectmen
don't have an issue.
But the selectmen themselves don't have the authority to make the decisions that we're talking about that are made at town meeting.
Well, I understand that. That's why we have a town meeting. But they can help me as an individual know where to go, how to handle it. Again, if it's a committee issue, if it's a environmental issue, you know,
Without interrupting the conversation, which I just did, I think I would just ask all of you, as you think about this, to size the solution to the problem. Right? You really have hit a nerve on a very specific issue in terms of, participation and debate at town meeting. And are we sure that a representative town meeting is going to help you solve that problem? I don't know, but I think the message you heard at your first meeting with Lauren Goldberg is that the charter can be changed at any time. So it's moving, because you do have a highly functioning local government here. I don't think anybody can dispute the town of Sandwich has a very highly functioning community. You've accomplished an awful lot in the last 10, 15 years, a lot in the last 5 years, and even, last maybe 6 years. The community has been, I'd say, very successful in managing through all types of crises that require engagement from the community and require town meeting action. And so I would just be conscientious about, how far is the solution? Is the solution really representative town meeting? Everything I've told you about it is my experience, but I don't know that the issues that you're having today are compel you to go to that limit. There may be some other measures you might want to take because this didn't pass the last time you discussed it. There's nobody in the room banging down your doors telling you that the form of government isn't working, but we all know there are some need for improvement. So I would ask you to think about what those interim measures might be so that you have a pathway or a continuum rather than an endpoint that may not result in what you hope it results in, because every community is different. And I wouldn't say what's right for the neighbor next door is right for this community. And I don't have a dog in the hunt, honestly. The forum is the community's forum.
Other thoughts?
Say again?
Other thoughts? Any other thoughts? Representative town meeting.
Well, I, for one, deliberately avoided trying to deep think this issue until I heard the presentation tonight. Over the next couple of weeks, I'd like to think and read about it. There's a lot that's appealing, and there's a lot that's risky. Mm-hmm. I just know that I'm one person who's had a feeling over the last decade of town meetings that just walk out shaking my head. No, I'm not satisfied, I should say. I, for one, am not satisfied that town meeting is capable of handling the complicated matters that are coming down the road as we grow. Mm-hmm.
It's a bit of a...
That's not very conclusive, but
it's almost
get back to you.
It's almost a bit of a formality that's not necessarily a productive experience.
Yeah.
Right, we go to town meeting because that's what we're obligated to do. That's what the charter says. That's what the laws of the Commonwealth say as part of the process. We go do it, but it's really just an activity that happens out of obligation. It is not something that necessarily is super productive, unless there are some unique hot button issues. But for a lot of the other issues, they're passed by, like the golf course.
Well, I think that's a good point, that it does work until there is a hot button issue. And then all of a sudden you get a whole slew of people showing up, and they're there for that one issue. They want to stand up for it or against it. And it's not unusual to see them then, after that particular vote, get up and leave. And, then town meeting moves on. And it really shouldn't be that way, I don't think. People should go there because they're interested in all of the issues.
Yeah.
It's unbalanced.
What Paul just referred to is something that you just shook my memory. Yeah, town meeting can stir the pot for one particular issue, and it may not be a particularly important issue in the big scheme of things. And everybody has their say there, and then they back to unanimous on every other article. That's not productive. At least I don't believe it is.
Okay, so do we want to table this issue, and do you want me to put it on the agenda again for 2 weeks from now?
I think we need to think about it.
Oh, I agree with
I mean, I
that.
think Heather's brought up some,
Are we supposed to be making decisions on things?
eventually.
We don't have to, but eventually, yes.
Eventually, yes.
I think it would be unreasonable to get to a decision on this particular issue this evening.
Oh my gosh, no. I would debate that.
Yeah. It's not my expectation that we have an opinion on this evening.
Good.
No, I just think that it's interesting because I thought I knew about representative town meeting, and I'm was always fairly in favor of it, but the more I'm listening to it, I'm not sure that I am, because there are more nuances to it that I don't think I really ever thought of or knew about. So I really would want to think very carefully about that.
I think we need time to process and what we've heard and what we may want to investigate. Obviously, that's something that in the next few weeks or month or more we'll be in a better position to make a decision on something.
Yeah, I'm all for putting it on the agenda another time. Maybe not the next meeting, but the one after that. I'd like to talk to a few people and do some more reading and digest what we've got right here.
Okay, so we'll put it on a future agenda, maybe for 4 weeks from now.
Super.
You can also ask Attorney Goldberg if that's something you want to talk with her about as well, if you have questions.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, so we've put a public comment on this agenda each week. Yeah. So this committee is very willing to accept comments from the public, and that would actually be wonderful. The people could come here and tell us what they think. We certainly have that opportunity. And I don't think we have an email address for this group, at least not a town email address, but I'm sure we can get one created. So if folks wanted to email us at like chartercommittee@sandwichmass.org, that could probably be set up and we could get those comments.
That would be great.
Because I don't want us to be in the position of just coming to conclusions and then going to town meeting to see what happens.
Right.
Yes, did you want to?
Other less exciting topics. Well,
I'm sorry, can I just say one other thing when you said that about going to town meeting? Again, I feel like up until town meeting is when we are, or until we finish our project here, but this is when we're debating the representative versus open. So by the time we get to town meeting, I feel like then that is when the citizens are voting on whether they like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Just a thought.
Do you want to?
Just a few others.
Sure.
No surprises. And I just walked through, I didn't comment on all of Bud's recommendations, but generally I agree with his approach and comments that he made to you at the last meeting, which I'm sure you will spend some time with. My first thought is that it really is time to make the change in the form of government to a select board, and that really is just to reflect the community that you are or that you aspire to be, and that just demonstrates, I think, an interest in openness and diversity. The next item is section 3.7 is about warrant articles. And this is and if you have your warrant, it's probably, your charter, it's probably easy to take a look at those. But This really went to including 3 years' worth of budget material in any recommendation that's an appropriation. Again, that hasn't been done. It's done in the overall budget presentation, but hasn't been done on an article-by-article basis. It doesn't seem to be required. The next one is the distribution and publication of the warrant. I thought this was a really important point, that we work with Attorney Goldberg to be as liberal and open as we can about how the warrant and the town meeting procedures are posted, so that we can do that in the most efficient, practicable, and modern way, and that the charter doesn't need to be changed from time to time. Again, on the role of the clerk, just as my observation of any town clerk, that the work that they do and the complications of that job really do require a professional that's been trained to do that work, and the risk that you run in an elected process could result in having, the minimum job requirement is get elected. And that is, given the state of elections, that is, I think, something you want to protect yourself from. We have a really terrific town clerk, does a tremendous job for the town, takes on additional duties that aren't required on behalf of the town, and is a real part of our team. So I think it's a wise time to really give that a lot of thought. Again, this is section 4.2.8 about just having elected officials interacting with town staff. It's really tricky because you do want everyone to have good collegial relationships and feel comfortable talking with staff, but questions and sort of direct inquiries really do need to come through the town manager. It is one of the features, I think Bud mentioned this, in communities that have less effective government or more issues with town managers. Those tend to be places where individual elected officials take on issues of their own and really direct and influence the staff. Again, we have a lot of room for engagement, and if there's issues, we should improve that engagement, but it is an important part of the charter, in my opinion. Town manager residency, I think this is one that also might take some consideration, and it really comes from the recruitment process that you might find yourself in as communities do recruit for a town manager. The recruitment pools are not as strong as they used to be. That ebbs and flows. They may be strong again, but if you're really looking to recruit someone with a particular set of talents and that person doesn't meet the residency requirements, I know there is the opportunity for a waiver, but I will just tell you from the town managers I've worked with across the Commonwealth, town managers don't want special treatment. They don't want to be the town manager with a waiver. I think they would like to come into a role, feeling that they have the full vote of the board in every way, and that is really my only thought on that, is that, one, you don't want to artificially limit your recruitment pool, and that town managers don't like special treatment as a general rule. And both of those sort of require that. One, I thought it was just worth mentioning again, section 4.1.4R, of giving the town manager the authority to act on behalf of the town in emergencies. And this may be standard or common in town charters, but it certainly exists in this one. And the flexibility that it gave this town, particularly in response to the COVID pandemic, was really evident. And it's something that we've talked about, I've talked with in presentations with other communities, and I've said this going back months, check your charter. Make sure your charter gives your town manager the authority to represent you in an emergency, because it allowed us to do things like create the COVID command team that really was a terrific support to the community. I think that model will continue to serve us well in other emergencies in the future. The financial provisions, I just note that the number of dates are challenging, and they just present the potential for missing them. And there's not a tremendous amount of benefit associated with any of the dates per se. The date of town meeting, the time frame for the printing of the warrant, the time frame for the posting of the warrant. I'd say if you had just one date, and that was a date that the budget was due to the Board of Selectmen, that would really set the stage for the dates that follow. And just, practically, that schedule needs to be done early in the fall, or in the fall for any town manager to meet that schedule. So I just advocate for less dates and focus on the things that are important. Like if it is important to have a joint meeting with the finance committee, that you include in the budget process that there's a joint meeting, or joint meeting with the school committee, or whatever you feel are important actions, that those be communicated rather than dates. I think that's it for me. And I want to thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you, and happy to come back in the future, but I feel like I've given you plenty to talk about.
Thank you.
And it's really your job. You're welcome.
Thank you. Certainly one of the more interesting discussions I think I've had at this table over the years. A lot of moving parts. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
I'm sure there'll be more. The next item we had on our agenda was to discuss the town manager's comments from the last meeting. I'm not sure if that's something that folks want to dive into on a detail level. I know that Sue has integrated those comments into this document, and I'll let her speak to that.
So what I did was I took all of Bud's comments, and I guess you could see that. I'm not used to this.
It's great.
So everywhere, hang on. Everywhere there is of course now I'm on a PC. How do you move this?
Try using two fingers and scrolling. Uh-oh. There you go.
Everywhere where there was a comment, he had a comment, I just highlighted it with yellow. So as we go through, these are the areas that he highlighted. And I just made comments to the side that kind of encapsulated what he had as opposed to the long comments. And this is a working copy. We can just keep going at it, however you want to do it. So I thought that was easier. It highlights those issues that he brought up. I will add Heather's comments to that. And then as we go through, I have another one where if we make a decision about language or whatever, I'll just put it in, because apparently, according to Lauren, you have to have the old language and the new language side by side. So that would be, once we make some kind of decisions relative to language, I will just put it in the other one. I just thought that was easier. If it's not, if you would rather have me do something else, I would be more than happy to do that.
That works for me. Do folks want to review the comments that Bud made last week? Do we want to review those in the future as we start to get into more of the mechanics of this document?
Well, wouldn't it be better that as we take up a particular issue, then we go to his comments and discuss
My
it?
guess is we're going to end up starting to review this document section by section. So if we have all these notes integrated in there, if anybody had any specific thoughts, I wanted to give them the opportunity to raise those or concerns or areas where they think we need to drill down more on. John, I'm not sure if you had the opportunity to maybe watch the last meeting.
I did not see it.
Yeah.
I should.
Yeah, when you have a chance, maybe that's a good idea. But I don't think there was anything in there that was particularly crazy. A lot of the stuff is just things that...
Did Bud track his...
He did, and...
the printed version of the charter that he gave out with his comments?
Yeah, it's...
Yeah. Okay, I've had this before, and I've read it a couple of times.
Okay.
I'll read it again.
Okay. I just want to make sure you had it. And I have a digital copy, if that is helpful to you, that has the highlights in it.
I'm sorry?
I have a digital copy as opposed to the printed copy. If you'd rather read it on a computer, I don't know.
Yeah, I may have that as well.
Yeah, they sent it out.
Yeah, they sent it out. That's right, I have that.
Yeah.
I have that as well.
I think it was...
Okay. So we'll address these items as we start to go through the document.
Item, okay.
So we have a meeting in 2 weeks. I do have the town clerk scheduled to come in We had some conversation here last time about having some department heads come in and such. So, and I worked with Heather a little bit, but we kind of jotted down some of those folks so I can try to get an additional person to come in for the next meeting in addition to the town clerk. So we can maybe talk to 2 different folks, which would probably occupy a reasonable amount of our time. And then the meeting following that, I will continue to see others that we can schedule. And then perhaps we pick up the representative town meeting discussion then 4 weeks from tonight, and we can survey that if folks want to do that at our next meeting.
That sounds good.
I just wonder, in the approach to this thing, there are some changes that I think are sort of low-hanging fruit. And I'm wondering if we might want to address some of those. You know, we could prioritize, but there are a couple of things that I think probably, I get a feeling that they would go pretty quickly for changes. And I wonder if we might want to, you know, make a list of those and get those out of the way. And, you know, we're going to have to deal for a while with some of the more complex ones. But there are some changes. I'll give you the example of the gender neutral.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that's probably a lot of the stuff that's come from the comments from the town manager and the assistant town manager. Some of these mechanical.
Yeah, I mean, some of these we could probably deal with and be done with it. And,
Yeah.
Yeah, I can put that as an agenda item, maybe for 4 weeks from today. Unless you want to do it next time, after the town clerk is here. Any preference?
It would seem to me that the town clerk will take a while, but you know, he'll present his side and then we'll talk about it. But we could take a few of these fairly simple changes and just approve them. You know, I would think we could get that out of the way.
I'm not opposed. Did you want to do it now?
Well, I don't think now, no.
Okay.
Are you talking about the gender neutral?
Well, that's one example.
Can we make that decision, and then I'll go through and make all of those corrections?
I mean, that
It
was,
could be one of the easier ones.
I would think so.
Covered a lot of pages.
I'm happy to entertain a motion.
I move that we change the name of the Selectmen, Board of Selectmen, to the Select Board, and change titles to gender neutral. Is that?
Yes, I would say utilize pronouns that conform with the recommendations of the Commonwealth.
What?
I don't think.
Well, when town council was here, she said that they have very specific language that they like to see when these documents come through, and that they change it if it's not exactly what they want. So, don't have to take my language by any means, but that was what I heard when she was here.
Well, I would say that I would certainly second that motion or that suggestion, but I also remember that what we put down, she will put into the proper language, the attorneys. So I don't think we have to worry about that. I think we get the consensus of how we feel, and then throw it to her, and she'll mark it up the way it has to be.
There's actually very little, other than, because I went through and checked it again after she spoke. I think I only made one change. There's very little language relative to gender issues in there at all. So I think other than select boards, chairperson, the ones that I've highlighted, there really isn't anything else. And I imagine in a lot of charters that there are.
I would just, what I did notice is that under, or is it Article 9, Section 9.2, I don't think that that has to even be there. I mean, this is a thing where it says any reference to gender in this chapter shall be construed, et cetera. If we make the change throughout the document, that section can be struck. It doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, you're right about that, I think. That was just a qualification, I think. I don't know who put that in. I mean, I think that the, sorry, I complain about microphones all the time. The previous charter committee, I think, did a pretty good job, or whoever worked with the previous committee, doing that anyway. So I think you're right. Was it 9? What did you say it was? 9 point?
9.2 under Article 9.
There it is. Okay, gender neutrality. Okay. I'm going to highlight that as possible elimination. Does that work?
So we have a motion to change the name of the Board of Selectmen to Select Board from Kelly with a second by Jim. Is there any additional discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays or abstentions? It is unanimous.
There. We did something.
Okay.
Other matters not reasonably anticipated.
Oops, I forgot to put that in. Oh, there we go.
Public comment. Public is declining to comment. Selectman Holden, would you like to approach to the microphone, please, sir, so the people at home can hear you? Thank you so much. My computer starts buzzing if they can't hear you.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me to make a comment. I enjoyed the discussion on the representative town meeting. I'm not going to venture an opinion on that one right now, but I enjoyed the discussion. One thing I did hear was an education process for town meeting, and maybe we should consider running a class like the Citizens Police Academy, a class on town meeting. Why we do it, how we do it, what to expect, how to participate. Just a thought. And I think I heard the line also, or a comment also, that review of the budget by FinCom might not necessarily be independent. Being a past member of FinCom and a former vice chair of FinCom, I might disagree with that. It's very independent and a very strenuous analysis of the budget that's passed along to the select board. And that's what I have, folks. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. Anyone else? Okay. We are adjourned. Our next meeting will be August 15th, 7 p.m. here at Sandwich Town Hall. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.